Well, good afternoon. I think we've got a terrific panel for you today. What I like about it is that it covers at the department level, of course. We're going to talk about some things, and then also coming down, we're talking to a couple of different components, which will be great, and we're going to have an industry rep to sort of set the tone. So I'm very excited about this discussion. I'll just say I won't give you a pitch for personnel like Luke did, because I don't want any competition when I go talk to Luke after about getting back into the department. I mean, he made a real pitch for that. So a couple things starting us off. We've got a number of different questions that we want to have laid out. We'll also have about 10 minutes for questions and answers from the audience. So that'll be a good opportunity for you to raise any questions that you would like to hear about. So the first thing that I'd like to sort of lay out there and ask our industry rep to help us out first. I'm going to pick on him. And I'd like to have him give us a bit of a tutorial about what is this thing that we're calling tactical communications and computing at the edge. How should we be thinking about it? And I'll also prep by saying that some of the government folks on the panel are in the early stages, so there's a lot of work to be done. So I think this will be instructive for them as well. So please.
Okay, yeah, sure. Really happy to be here and talking to everybody about this subject. And as Ciena being a infrastructure company who puts together networks and computing infrastructure, something that's near and dear to my heart. So when we talk about tactical network, tactical communications, and edge compute, things like that, this has been an evolving capability. It used to be that comms were relatively slow. Compute was more expensive and not particularly ubiquitous. And over the last couple of decades, but of late, it's really gotten to the point where we're able to push capabilities towards the edge that historically we've had to keep near the core or in the data centers. So what we're working on in industry is really kind of trying to take the network and take the communications infrastructure and take those limitations that used to exist and make those go away, so that the problems you have to solve are the mission problems, and they're not bounded by your communications infrastructure, or really whether you're at the edge of the network or closer to the core. And so the kinds of things that we're as industry bringing to market, and that we're the different enterprises are now able to use are things like, of course, when you're talking about the network itself, you got to get some of the high-speed networks as close as you can to the edge, and those capacities have been really going through the roof. We're able to bring, as long as you can get fiber or even some of the higher speed radio technologies, you can get gigabits, even terabits of capacity, at least close to the edge of the network. And then when you're at the edge of the network, you're talking about various forms of wireless. It could be CBRS radio, it could be SATCOM. Now, some of the things that we're looking at is getting 5G technologies, so things that are interoperable with the handsets that all of us carry around in the first place, getting those to the edge. And even if you're outside of traditional Verizon, AT&T coverage, you can get mobile cell on wheels. You can bring that capability to the edge so that your users can use it with the mechanisms and vehicles that they're used to, and then still be able to get it back. And then again, it used to be you had to backhaul a lot of information because you didn't have the compute necessary to do real-time computations. And even some of the previous panel was talking about some of the AI. A lot of the AI is still done back in the core of the network, but you're able to do this more and more at the edge, so that you're able to get latencies down and more real time. So it's really an evolution and really a sea change in the ability to solve the problems that you have closer to the edge, closer to where the mission is, and not having to backhaul everything. The flip side, though, is when you do need to backhaul, we've got nearly ubiquitous bandwidth, and compute deeper in the network to solve some really hard problems. So we're able to partition problems in ways that you really couldn't before, and make it really make it about solving the mission problems and less about we can only solve it this way because we don't have the compute or network infrastructure. Now those are pretty much there.
Super. I mean, that's a terrific laydown of the capabilities that are envisioned. What I'd like to do now, though, is ask the government representatives to talk a little bit about this idea of operational missions that they see on the edge. And, as we are talked about earlier, some of these are aspirational. And so I'll ask the government reps as they go through to say, this is something we're hoping for in the future, whereas, point out those operational issues or missions that are already ongoing. So let me begin with Craig, if I could.
Yep. All right. So like what you were saying, by the way, by pushing that out there, I think one of our big mission sets along the way has got to be getting that data out there. And it's got to be video, voice, and data. One of the challenges we always have is the amount of data when we get it out there and putting the commute out there. So if you start looking at the video side of the house, how do you get live video back to the operating centers, back to headquarters, wherever, and actually be useful data and useful video? So one of the things we're really looking in, one of the challenges is how do you do that across 5G in a mobile setting? Yeah, we can wire it to a tower, we can wire it to a building, but when we need to be mobile with some of our partners, how do you get it out there and actually push it back and be solid data and useful data for operations? So one of the things we continue to work on with the components from the headquarters perspective is the operational mission, what is number one? The second is, what is the data you need and when do you need it? So that's one of the big struggles that we've always had is we can come and Field of Dreams perspective and we can build it and they will come. But a lot of times it's always too much, it's too costly, it's not secure. So we've got to keep pushing and working with components to do that. Whether that's video, whether that's voice, or whether that's data, and getting the type of data that they need out to the edge.
Great. So Charlie, give us a perspective on FEMA. What's your goal for the edge?
Well, I see LaTuita out there. Maybe I should recruit her to help me here.
You want to phone a friend.
Yeah, phone a friend.
Using the edge.
Exactly. So, in typical response, I think that FEMA has a lot of experience at getting communications into, not that there's anything normal about a disaster, but a hurricane in Florida. We know how to get comms on the ground. We know how to get DECMERS in there, get things stood up, get comms back up and running, and start to reconstitute things. This year, I think we saw a huge shift with Typhoon Mawar, and I'm still learning the difference between a typhoon and a hurricane, and with the fires in Maui, where we did not have the ability to get comms in there in a really rapid fashion, right? So, we had to quickly pivot and go to low Earth orbital satellite through, in this case, Starlink, and stand up some comms to be able to back end into our data center. We're in the process of migrating those systems out of our data centers and into cloud. And we really believe that that's a key part of our journey towards really using the power behind edge, because if we get those systems in cloud and we get them dispersed across the cloud community, that gives us access to a number of points of presence where we can then use edge computing to do some of that on the ground work while the rest of the comms are getting stood back up, and then back end that data into those systems so that it can later get uploaded and finish processing. But I liken it to the work that I've seen going on in the Border Patrol today, and I know I'm no longer at CBP, but they've really done a lot with Edge in terms of trying to take care of, trying to utilize what they call that dead time where they're transporting people to do some data collection, do some computing. We want to be able to do the same thing, and whether that's administering flood insurance claims, whether that's individual assistance claims, whether that's any of the benefits that we give to survivors, and or just working with our whole SLTT community to share information, be able to understand what the operational lay of the land is, and help standing and reconstituting back up things like communications, transportation, all those critical things. Edge, we believe in the future is going to play a really key role in helping kind of take care of some of that space between when we first get boots on the ground in the response to when we're actually starting to do recovery. So I think there's a great future there for us.
So let me just follow up on that, because you have a unique mission. I mean, you come in when there's been a disaster, when there's been some issue, and you're not necessarily falling in on a capability that's already there. So have you thought about how do you keep that edge vibrant in the midst of some sort of disaster? Is that a problem that you're dealing with?
Well, honestly, Dan, I don't think we're that far along on our thinking yet. But what I have learned so far about Edge is there's so many different ways to kind of crack that nut, whether that's through carriers, whether that's through other types of things that are out there that we can get to and kind of put up some initial systems capabilities and have that downlink to our whatever our handheld devices are, mobile devices. I think there's such a variety of those things, coupled with things like Starlink and the emerging, because you're seeing more and more of these low Earth orbital companies starting to formulate. Right. Hoping that market's going to continue to kind of push along so we get some competition in there too. That coupled with our traditional, push-to-talk comms, I think really does help us move towards Edge. And if you kind of look at where the traditional tactical communications is going, they are starting to look at like low bandwidth kind of comms traffic going over that. So we could leverage some of that also to take care of some of our TACCOM needs.
So let's hear from TSA. David, what do you have to say?
Thanks for the opportunity to be here. TSA, our mission, being out in the front lines of the airports, securing the traveling public. There's a lot of data that sits at that checkpoint. TSOs, transportation security officers, need data to do their jobs. I'm sure you'd be surprised to hear that we can't give every person a piece of government equipment to get that data. So that's one of our struggles, is getting that data to those frontline workers to do their mission and get there. So we're looking at some things to get the edge computing going. I focus more on the device side. So for me in my world, it's getting those devices out that we can then use that data, process that data, and then even on the other side, input that data that's coming from the checkpoint back to the people at headquarters or the coordination centers that need to make those decisions. I think there's a great future. We were talking earlier, we're still in our infancy a little bit of edge computing, so I think there's a gold mine of stuff for TSA to leverage there.
Terrific. So, the next question I'd like to sort of pose to the group is to think about how far you are along in your transformation efforts, and try to characterize it for the group, because I think industry would like to know where there are opportunities. you know, at times you may need help with just thinking through the technology. Other times you may be thinking about the devices themselves or the networks or the ancillary equipment. So it would be useful if we could just sort of go down the line, starting with OCIO, and just hear a little bit about your thoughts.
My OCIO, your OCIO. It's mine. Okay. So from a headquarters perspective, we're still trying to find that ability to do interoperability across all of the components and provide some type of data and solutions for that will cover multiple things. So one of the areas that we're looking at right now is we have a pilot going on around the National Capital Region and the National Mall, where we're looking to get, where there's limited data or limited spectrum, there's limited availability of video, voice, and data, because everybody needs it around that National Capital area and the National Mall. So we're looking to work with partners on this to start really finding solutions where you can start doing network slicing, where you can start doing the availability to get the data back to, and dynamic data from one to another. So we're not doing the old days of sticking with, you've got this much bandwidth, you got this much. But it really needs to be based on an operational perspective, and the dynamics got to change. So as we shift between operations on the National Mall, how do you push that where you need feeds back to a Secret Service element, CBP, TSA, I'm sure FEMA's there too somewhere. But I think we're still looking for that partnership to understand how can you start doing that better and better for the dynamic bandwidthing, but also how do you push the right data to the right time? So you're not sitting there with a technician in the back, you know, ramping it up, ramping it down, and throttling all that data as we go. So that's one area that we're looking at right now. Matter of fact, there's RFI. So really could use your help in thinking about that, looking at the technology that we can bring in from camera systems, tactical communications, mission critical push-to-talk apps. You name it. We kind of are looking at this as like the perfect scenario to pull both the requirement in from the federal side and the vendor's expertise on this area that's critical to the government, critical to the nation, and how do you like get the right solution in time and securely. So
Good. So, and if you were characterizing kind of by way of a percentage, how far along you are on this journey?
I think that we've drawn it. No, we've gotten some proposals in. Probably 20% of the planning is done that we're looking at.
Good. Okay.
A lot of the components already have pieces there. A lot of towers there. The cameras are there, but how do you tie in that back end? So,
Great. How about turning that to FEMA, and let me see what FEMA's thoughts are on, and don't be bashful about giving us a percentage as well.
Yeah, so I mean, I've got to back up to where we really are, and that is the cloud journey, right? And so there has been a fair amount of work in some of the programs on getting to cloud. Certainly, the Pivot program moving out into GCP, GMM modernization being built in the cloud. Currently, some of the individual assistance development is being done in cloud. And then Ms. Hutchinson, prior to my arrival, started an effort to really start moving us out of the existing data centers. And we've got two kind of tracks going on there where we're doing some lift and shift of systems and then some replatforming. And so the lift and shift work has been going on for a little over a year now. It's about 48% along. And the replatforming work, we've just really gotten to the point where we've identified the first 5 systems that we're going to replatform and start to hopefully start migrating some of those workloads in the next couple months. So that's kind of where we are in cloud. I really believe we have to get through some of those big hurdles before we can really do a good design around where we want to go with edge. But certainly when you look at things like flood insurance, flood mapping, where they want to head with direct to customer. I believe there's probably some discussions that could start occurring now with like the Sam Holtzmans of the world on how that could fit into where they want to head. If I were to kind of read the crystal ball, I would say that's probably one of the first areas that will probably go after some edge computing and start to tackle that part of their mission, because they do a lot of work that's not just at the primary field office that gets stood up out there in a disaster. They're out in the communities and working door to door in a lot of cases. So much more need for ubiquitous computing, and cannot rely on cell networks that may be down for weeks at a time while terrestrial infrastructure is being stood back up in order to reconstitute that stuff. So I would say those are kind of the first areas I would see. So if I had to give it a percentage, I would say less than 5% there. So
Okay. I'll get to you in a second, Jim. David, tell us about TSA. I think we're in our early stages. I think it'd be tough to put a percentage, maybe similar to FEMA, less than 10% there. We are working, to get connectivity, still working through our EIS transition to stabilize that connectivity at all our airports, looking at some RFIs with Starlink and the satellite communications at some tough to reach locations. We are working, like I said, I deal with the hardware side of stuff a lot. So my bread and butter is getting that device out for those TSOs and everyone to use. We were recently just able to put out a couple thousand iPhones, so then we can leverage some of that data that's being pushed out from all our systems. So it's that's the small step I see us taking. There's a lot more work to do on the edge computing, but we're getting there. Okay, Jim, you wanted to come in on this question? Otherwise, I'm going to start you off with another one, but go ahead.
Yeah, just a little bit, because you're asking, how things are going as we move towards the edge, and I thought I could provide just a little perspective, because I support the DoD agencies, the civilian agencies, and although I would say, in terms of migrating increased capacity towards the edge, the tactical edge, if you will, that is just starting, but one of the things we're starting to see is, a desire to leverage, as we get to the edge, more commercial type technologies, 5G being, Class 1 LTE before that and 5G now. And, many folks, of course, are going to be, as a baseline, using the various carrier services. Yes, absolutely. But, what do you do in places where there's, not a carrier service? You've got a big base, or you're out really at the edge, even some of the border areas where you don't have the kind of coverage you need. How do you turn up your own capabilities in that area? Even on some of the large enterprises inside buildings, they'd like to have an edge capability that allows them to use their handsets that perhaps they don't have. And even for some of the larger agencies, can they use particular parts of the spectrum that are allocated for government users? N79 happens to be one that we're doing some work in, so that you can use protected spectrum and get more secure services at the edge, and then still when you walk back into Verizon or AT&T's coverage, you can still use that as well. And so we're starting to see a lot of interest in that, and that's driving investments in equipment that supports a number of different protocols that's able to do classical networking functions as well as the wireless functions. The other thing that computing at the edge, as we're seeing more of that, is allowing us to do is really to have more programmable and flexible edge elements. We're able to do things in software now that we couldn't before, because we now have the ability, we have so much compute and storage available at the edge that we don't have to have fixed function hardware-based devices. We can make them software programmable, and so your capabilities can evolve as you know, as new software is available and as new missions, you can take the same equipment and program it to different things. So those are the kinds of things that we're seeing some of our large enterprise customers ask about. And it's just starting, and we're starting to, you know, I would say, yeah, 5–10%, but it's going to accelerate over the next few years.
Well, to follow on that, because that's very interesting, I mean, are there any solutions that have been fielded, say, across the government or even within industry that you might recommend for the industry or for the government representatives that are here? I mean, are there exemplars that you think are worthy of them thinking about?
So, rather than throw some specific names out, which I have,
right.
but is in this forum is a little challenging sometimes. But you know, there were some discussions of you know, edge to cloud and how do we get to cloud. There are a number of services, some of which Ciena supplies directly, some of which you know, other equipment providers provide that make it much easier and much faster to get from where you are back to the cloud. So there's cloud interconnect solutions that are in fact available. And as I said, there are some specifically tailored edge wireless solutions, particularly in the 5G realm, that use protected spectrum that are available for high security, you know, enterprise class applications. So both terrestrial wireline and wireless solutions that are actually integrated with networks and can be brought together as a solution are available. One of the challenges that the industry has and that some of the consumers in the various large enterprises have is how to consume this in a way that's easy, because a lot of them aren't necessarily comms experts. So we in industry are spending a fair bit of time trying to make the solutions easier to access, to increase the level of automation, so you don't have to be, you know, a rank expert in order to take advantage of that.
Great. So we've talked a lot about the benefits that could possibly accrue from edge solutions. I just want to pick at this a little bit and ask our government reps here to talk a little bit about, do you have any concerns as you're going down this path? You know, often you hear about cost being a concern. Sometimes you hear about security of data. Sometimes you hear about, you know, sometimes the data doesn't get evacuated back. So you can lose your data if you're not having protocols that bring it back. So are there issues in particular that you're worried about? And I'd like to start again, Craig, if you'll lead us off.
Yeah, thanks. So two in general. One goes back to the security is always a concern, right? Cybersecurity in our realm, the old days of having analog video or analog voice days and having radios and doing TACCOM and not securing those, you know, those days are kind of far gone. We've gone digital. And so as we start pushing further and further out, we've got to start really considering the security around this. Not only the device, but the data that's coming back. So how are you protecting the core, especially when they start connecting into our big networks? How are you protecting the data at the edge? And so we still really want to partner with industry on this, is understanding how do you protect that data. The second is around the type of solution we put out. So right now, if you look at a 5G trying to push out that control and user plane further out, you know, not every solution is going to fit that. So a lot of times you have put these big solutions in that has big get to the cloud, but you have all the control back at the central location. So how do you start pushing that further out to the edge, start pushing onto the user device and providing just the data you need to do the operations? So what we're seeing is a lot of times it's well, you can take this same solution and put it everywhere across the country, and it just is not the same thing. You either have to have that architecture and want to be centralized and push it out, or you need to really look at different capabilities to do that.
Okay. Charlie.
I think Craig's point really complements what I was saying earlier with us around really trying to get that cloud solution in place, because the points he's making are exactly the same kind of issues that we're dealing with in cloud, where, we need to make sure we've got a common security environment wrapped around all of our CSPs that come together as our cloud environment. We've got to have common access control so that, I've got the same level of assurity that access to those edge systems is the same as it would be if it was a hardened system, in a data center somewhere. I have to worry about nation states trying to get to us, and we've already seen where, they're really looking for areas around disasters to try to get in and get some intel out of. I think we saw that with Typhoon Volt and some other recent. I worry about those three things. I think the other big thing, though, is as we look at SaaS solutions, I know that there's a lot of going to be conversation, or was conversation today, about AI, but making sure that those capabilities are designed in such a fashion that I can have pieces running at the edge that can couple back into the main core of the SaaS product, especially as we start to talk more and more about AI. I may need to have that small bot capability out on the edge, but at some points in time, it may need to back end. And in our environment, I could see where we're going to do probably a lot of analytics around things like weather and flood levels and all those kind of things before the disaster. And that's information that we could pump down to those edge devices prior to the event happening, right? So that we've already got some of that level of data out there. So making sure that we're doing that pre-planning and knowing what is going to be needed in order to be able to accomplish that function.
Great. David, your thoughts?
One of the benefits of going third with these guys is security as well. So I'll just echo what they said. Security would be big for us, but I'll touch on another one. Scalability. We have 600 plus locations around the country. Can I get that solution into, I probably can get it into an LAX, but can I get it into Casper, Wyoming, right? So it's, how do I leverage that solution to get out to all these locations, providing them the same data, because they all need the same data, and how do I scale that? So I would see that as being one of our big concerns.
Great. So,
Can I add one
yeah,
more?
please.
Physical hardening. Physical hardening is going to be really key, especially in a lot of our lines of business, because we operate in not typical environments, and making sure that they can withstand weather, heat, all those kind of things is going to be really key.
Great. So we've got about 10 minutes left. I want to open it up for audience questions, but I want a very quick, and it's a lightning round, and that is, are there budgets? And I just want give me a thumbs up or thumbs down as they're getting their questions ready. Are you comfortable that there is money? And I'm not looking for specifics here, understanding our budget turmoil, but more about conceptually, do you have numbers in mind, and are you working this through? So very quickly, like a 10-second thumbs up, thumbs down, whatever.
Senator, the administration has no official position on it.
Thank you. Okay. CIO, how about you?
Sure, there's money. There's always money. No, there are types of money for allocations for certain type of solutions.
Good. David? Anything?
Yeah, similar to what Craig said, we have some avenues that we could pull in some funding to make some things work.
Okay. So, questions?
Dan, if I could add one more thing.
Yeah, please.
I think this is a really key opportunity, though, if you look at CBP and I believe TSA with these invent funds, I really think those types of things need to be thought about more across, not just DHS, but across the community, to allow us to try stuff out, try quick things, fail fast, or succeed quickly and move out.
I mean, I think that's a great point, is being able to innovate. And I think the government is sort of changing its tone on how they feel about innovation and the need for a little more risk. Hopefully that change in tone will result in change in action as well. I saw a question here.
Jason Cronin from Axiom Consultants. This is probably for Jim. It has to do with security. Obviously, security is an issue. It's been mentioned a couple of times. But what do you feel is a long pole in the tent when it comes to endpoint or security at the endpoint? I'm not asking what Ciena's solution is, but what do you think the long pole in the tent is? Thank you.
So as far as endpoint security, there are a number of different solutions. So I don't see there being a real problem with endpoint security, other than maybe getting the appropriate standardization in place so that when you're doing security in one place, you have the ability to do that in multiple other places. One of the things that we as an infrastructure company and industry writ large is working at doing is being able to secure the information at multiple layers of its transport. So, absolutely you want to be able to secure it at the handset, but you've got threats at multiple points in the network. So you actually have to secure it in multiple places. Yes, at the endpoint, but also as you go deeper in the network, you want to protect those parts of the network as well. So, the problem set, or the long pole, if you will, I would say, is having, multi-layered security available that covers your entire network, your data as it's in motion, your data in rest, and at the various points throughout your network.
Great. Yes, please.
Anthony Serrano, Mantech. Question for Mr. Basham. You mentioned things like data throttling, data protection, dynamic data, things that AI could potentially solve. And I'm asking you because you're in operations, so we know at the operational level, NOC and SOX, collaboration with other departments, DoD, academia, is well-intentioned and planned, but they're at the bottom of the list because you got operations and tactical stuff going on. Do you see like a renewed prioritization of that collaboration with DoD and other industries to implement AI for computing at the edge?
Yeah, thank you for the question. We are currently connected well. So when we start up the NOSC at the DHS level, we started really working internally to DHS and pulling all that component NOC and SOC, the traditional ones, back into one location and really porting that out. Working with CISA also on their threat hunting and everything, really started bringing it out across the major departments of the federal government, whether that's DOD, whether that's DOJ, and the other areas. So we do work quite often with the other ones to collaborate to find out what they're doing, but also getting that threat information across.
We have another question here.
Hua Ni from IBM Consulting. The question for David. On the TSA side, sounds like TSA already started to doing some pilot with thousands of iPhones that you mentioned. Would you be able to share some of the primary use cases that you are looking at? Or is it just focusing on the efficiency, or maybe some transformative capability with the edge devices being available?
Thanks for the question. Yeah, so we gave out those devices to our supervisory transportation security officers. In collaboration with CBP, we allow them to use the CBP One app. So when people are coming across the border, they can be identified, and that's on their phones, and they can use that at the checkpoint. We started at the border, but now it's been scaled to the entire country. So all the supervisors across the country have iPhones to be able to use that app, and then to your point, be more efficient. They can get data that they can relay down to their subordinates at the checkpoint.
Any other questions? We have time for one more? Great.
Hi, Jeff Smith with Ventera. My question, outside of the devices themselves and the infrastructure to connect them, is the business systems to manage sort of extended operations around more devices at the edge, the asset management, the logistics management to replace them, the spares, basically the business systems to enable that compute at the edge to be maintained and resilient. And then maybe a second part of that question is how is it different for something like TSA, which might have fixed facilities versus FEMA or even CBP that might have to have dynamic situations?
So who wants to start? That is an easy question. CIO, okay, you want?
Yeah, I'll just say that, you know, we have a fairly robust logistics process for maintaining and deploying equipment, getting it out to sites, and then retrieving it once the disaster stands down. And we do sparing to make sure that we've got enough devices to deploy. We try to keep it no less than 20% availability. So we've got a very good process in place for doing that today. The challenge, though, does become around some of these remote areas, and I talked about Guam, I talked about Maui, Alaska certainly are areas where it's difficult to get stuff in and out of in a rapid fashion. So those will remain to be challenges, and if I can speak for my former colleagues at CBP, they also have a very robust depot kind of a situation where they can get equipment in quick, get it serviced, get it redeployed, and or a lot of our, the way a lot of our contracts are set up, sometimes the vendor is responsible for actually doing that work and making sure that there's uptime and availability. So,
Craig, David, anything to add?
I mean, we at TSA mirror pretty much what Charlie said there. We have a pretty good logistics group that gets everything out the door for us. We get stuff back into our warehouse in Springfield and get it right back out. So you wouldn't think getting an IT you'd be into logistics, but it is a lot of that, getting stuff back and forth.
Jim, how about you? Anything to add on that question? Anything about resilience on the edge as the last question?
So just in terms of the question about, you know, back office, I would say we spend a fair amount of time and effort for ourselves being able to interface with software and infrastructure planning tools that are, you know, northbound or above us. So there are a lot of standardized interfaces and specific application APIs, programming interfaces that are designed to let the users or the management systems figure out what network assets are available, if there's any problems with anyone, and make that visible so that from a logistics perspective they know what network paths are available or even what devices are in use right now or need service, et cetera. So.
Well, it's clear we could go on a lot longer, but Megan wouldn't invite us back. So, we're going to adhere to the schedule. But how about a round of applause for the panel? Terrific.